Hey guys, here we are in the midst of this torrential rain and storm that's hitting Sydney. And it just reminded me of what our Savior Jesus said at the end of his Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 to 27. And this is what he said about the wise and foolish builder. He said, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash." You know, Jesus compares the wise and foolish builders. And the wise man who built his house on the rock is the one who actually hears Jesus' words and puts them into practice. And Jesus reminds us that when we come to him and we not only hear his words, but we're actually putting his words into practice, then our foundation is on him as our rock. And so when the storm comes, the rain, such as we're experiencing now in Sydney, when this storm comes, we'll be able to better withstand it and to stand firm, because our foundation is on the rock that is Jesus and obeying his word. You know, this reminds us of James chapter 1, verse 22, where we're told, "Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says." You know, Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10 tells us that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So we also see that the wise man is one who fears or reverences the Lord. In contrast, what's interesting is that the foolish man who built his house upon the sand, that word for foolish in Matthew chapter 7, verse 26, in the Greek can actually mean godless. It means one who is without God. You see, the man without God, the foolish man, is the one who may even hear the words of Jesus, but does not obey them, does not obey his word and put his word into practice. And it is the foolish man's house that comes crashing down from the storm because its foundation was built on the sand rather than on Jesus and his words, and putting them into practice as the rock. And so my prayer for us in the midst of this storm and torrential rain that we're going through, especially in Sydney and other parts of Australia, is that this would be a reminder for our foundation to be on Jesus as the rock and putting his word into practice in our lives. You know, what's interesting with this passage is, did you notice that the same storm came on both the wise and the foolish builder? The word that was used for the storms for both of them was that the rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. It says this both in verse 25, referring to the wise builder, but also in verse 27, referring to the foolish builder. So the storm was the same. Firstly, this reminds us that when we put our trust in Jesus, it doesn't mean that we're going to be exempt from the storms in life. Believers and unbelievers will go through the same storms, the same struggles. But the difference is, when your foundation is on Jesus and his word and putting his word into practice as the rock, then when the same storm comes that will normally get the better of others and overwhelm others, for those whose foundation is on Jesus and as the rock and his word, we will be able to better withstand the storm and to stand firm in our faith in him. And so my prayer for us is that this storm that we're going through physically will remind us to make sure that Jesus is our firm foundation, that He is the rock on which we stand, and putting His words into practice. So God bless, and my prayers go out to all those who are affected by this storm, and I pray that both you and your families and your houses and cars may be kept safe during the storm by Jesus. So God bless.